Grahame Sydney, acclaimed New Zealand artist. Grahame, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Hi Leanne, good to be here.
Great stuff. Now tell me, first of all, how is it in the beautiful Cambrian Valley this afternoon? Chilly?
Well, it's grey and very damp, I'm afraid. It's a soggy day, but for the first time this year, there's a reasonable amount of snow on the ranges around us. It's been very bare now.
Now, yeah, it has, hasn't it? And it is nice. I quite like having this cold snap. It invites the sense of coziness. But for you were saying earlier when I was chatting to you today that life didn't really change that dramatically when COVID struck. Just tell us what you've been up to the last couple of years.
The life of an artist is a pretty quiet one anyway. At least in my case, you choose places like this, Cambrian Valley, just near St. Bathans where we live, because you want to be amongst the subject matter that captures you most, and that you want to try to give some form of loving, respectful form to. And we live on the hill. I built a house here on the terrace overlooking the valley 22 years ago. And it's a very quiet corner. It's almost a secret corner of Central Otago, and we all prefer it that way in our valley. So when COVID struck, the only thing that happened really, the only change was that just a fewer people turned up knocking on the door. Life carried on very much as usual. I walk about 10 paces to my studio. I shut the door on the world and hide in my solitary confinement cell very happily, and that's literally the way we got through COVID. It felt very much as normal, but just a little quieter.
And so do you find, you mentioned about people not turning up at the door, do you really get cold callers looking for your work that often?
That's often. I think I've cultivated a reputation for being hard to get and difficult, and I like it very much. It's not true,
yeah.
But you don't want cold callers really. Although you've got to be aware that any interest is welcome, Leanne. I mean, you can't get too arrogant about this. If people are interested enough in your work to want to meet you and say, do you have anything here, then you should be flattered.
Yes.
And it doesn't happen that often, no.
And so are you getting a lot of international commissions right now? What's occupying you the most? What's keeping you the busiest?
I've never been one to do commissions. That's a bit of a fallacy. I don't like commissions because commissions imply that you are doing something to please somebody else, doing something on request, somebody else's idea, and the whole purpose of a commission is to please the commissioning agent. That's completely against my philosophy. I've always believed, and the older I get, the stronger I feel about this. Artists must work to please no one but themselves, and must never even consider the audience at any point. The moment you start considering an audience or thinking of an audience for the work you're doing, you start to dilute the most important thing of all, which is your own peculiar manner, your own signature, the things that are impulsive in yourself, your own instinct, and you must not dilute that by considering an audience. So that's the commission word shoved aside.
Absolutely. Goodbye commission. We won't refer to that again.
Yeah, not for me. And
but
yes, there is a lot of international. I do get international interest, thanks entirely to the internet. That's what's changed in my lifetime very, very significantly. The world of an artist has gone from being a localized phenomenon and perhaps spread up the country if you're fortunate, But now, because of websites, you can be seen anywhere in the world and contacted from anywhere in the world, and yes, that does happen.
And you said to me earlier as well that you never take it for granted. Like I suggested that, look, you're renowned, so therefore you could perhaps rest on your laurels a little, but that's not the way you operate.
No. It's a sort of miracle story for me, anyway, to think that this is now my 48th year as a full-time painter. I mean, it was an impossible dream, really, in the 1960s when I was growing up. But here we are, and I've always had the firm belief that if I can get one more year, I'll be lucky. So that's the way it's gone, and I still feel the same way. I hope there will be enough support for the things that I'm doing. I've only got to find one buyer for each work that I finish. You don't need thousands or millions of admirers. You only need the one brave soul who wants what you've done. And I just keep hoping that each thing I finish might find a good home.
So you want to feel that kind of connection with the buyer, that it's going to be a loved piece. So, it's almost like an animal, I suppose. You're handing over your work to the care of someone, in a way.
Yep. An animal is one, a pet is one analogy. An easier one, perhaps, Leanne, is to think of the works as your babies, and that you're adopting them out. I never really feel that people who buy anything of mine are taking it away from me, because no matter where they go, they'll always be mine. And
right.
And that's the way you sort of cope with the sadness of losing your babies. So you're looking to find the best adoptive home where the work's going to be loved for the right reasons and appreciated and taken care of. It's all a bit exaggerated, I know, but that's the sort of sense that you've got to bring to it. Because it is disappointing when you spend a long time making something and then you have to kiss it goodbye.
Right.
So you want it to go to the best possible appreciative home.
Right. It's a lovely way of looking at it, but I completely get that, especially, I suppose, some of the larger works. Does that make it even an even bigger wrench to sell?
Yeah, it is, but it is a wrench. It's always a wrench to sell, but it's a fact of professional life. You've got to sell what you make in order to survive. So if you're not going to do that, then you're in the wrong game. It's just something you have to accept and understand as being a foundation of survival. I can't hang on to 3 or 4 months' wages. I'm not rich enough. I wish I was, but if I had immense amounts of money through whatever good fortune, then I wouldn't have to sell at all, and I would keep everything I did, because I like to have them around me. But you can't do that. That's just not realistic.
But it strikes me that you're not the sort of man who equates success with great wealth anyway, because you've had a rich life, in doing what you love.
Yeah, I mean, how lucky can you be? This is what I dreamed of doing, never thought would be possible, and now I find, here I am knocking on the door of my mid-70s, and I've had a lifetime of incredible luck being able to be a painter all my life. What's that worth? I've never had a boss. Since 1974, I think, was the last time I had any sort of boss, except for the terrifying phone calls from the bank when things weren't as good as they are now, when they're wondering when you're going to be able to repay things. I've certainly had some very tight and worrying times, but I've always been my own boss since 1974, and I don't have to get up in the morning to work if I don't want to. I don't have to work if I don't want to. Now, what's that worth? How do you equate that with money?
Right.
It's a different attitude, and I've always been grateful for the fact that I've been able to live this way and manage to survive and bring up my 2 kids in reasonable comfort and live a life which I think is extraordinary in this, not only in this day and age, but has been since I got lucky in the early 70s.
Mm. But, had you not had this talent, it would never have happened. And, that's where it's at. And you also mentioned that painters often improve with age. So I guess each year you're thinking, well, I may be, getting a little older, but hey, what's to stop me doing this for several more or many, many, many more years if you have your health?
Yeah, you keep hoping for good health, the ability to keep working. As you get older, I mean, surely the rationale, the logic of it should be that you learn more, therefore you should be getting better. And what's more important still, you learn more about yourself. And any creative artist, I think, is primarily trying to tell the story of what it's like being them. Everything you do, I don't care what game you're in. It could be music, writing your songs. It could be the fact that you're a fiction writer or a non-fiction writer. You might be a filmmaker or a photographer or a painter. Whatever you are in the creative realm, I think the most interest always is, and the best work, is when you get some sense of what it's like being someone else, not the person you are. You know what it's like being yourself, but you don't know what it's like being someone else. And great work always ushers you into someone else's world very convincingly. And you get lost in someone else's world. You're not yourself for a while. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's what grows with maturity and experience and opportunity, that courage to be responsive to your own instincts and not care at all about what anyone else says. Absolutely.
And that happens, I think, from probably about 50 onwards, doesn't it? If not earlier. Maybe 40.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it took me a long time to get comfortable with who I was and stop wishing I was someone else. But it is the greatest good fortune of all when you are given the opportunity to explore that and to swim around in that particular pond.
I agree. I think you put that very well. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do have a few of your songs, and I think we probably do need to take a little break and play one of them, because there's some interesting ones that you've selected. And the first one I've called up, Grahame, is Randy Newman. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this song, Losing You, we've got?
Which one is it?
Losing You.
Randy Newman is one of the many that, because I work at home and in the studio and I need entertainment, I have had music on playing just about all the time. And so these people are just, part of my makeup. And Randy Newman, he's wonderful and acerbic and witty and everything, but sometimes he does a very beautiful love song. And I think he's capable of extraordinary tenderness, and Losing You is one that he wrote, I think, for one of his departed wives. But he's very honest about it, and I think he's a fantastic man. I love Randy Newman.
Losing You, Randy Newman.
Yeah, he's interesting, isn't he? I was just thinking, listening to that, Leanne, that one of the reasons I do admire Randy Newman so much is that it is not that he's a great singer. Very clearly, he doesn't have a great voice, but he's a perfect example of what really matters, which is that if you're fired by a great love of something like he is of music and writing, and like I am of painting, you don't have to be the best in the classic sense. What what you have to do is recognize your limitations and make them into a strength. And Randy Newman has never tried to be, and doesn't wish, I don't think, that he was or is a great singer with a great voice. He's a great singer because he sounds like Randy Newman, and he's made that limitation into his identifiable signature and strength, as have so many others. You think of Bob Dylan. We're not talking great singers here.
True.
We're talking people of extreme vocal limitation. But what great singers they are within that limitation. They've turned it into their identifiable, distinctive signature. And that's what matters. No matter what it is you're creating, if you have the desire and the passion for it, I'm wary of the passion word, but if you love it enough and you can't help yourself, then you've got to stop wishing that you were some form of perfection. What you do is try to recognize what your qualities are, however limited, and turn them into your strengths.
And sing from your soul.
Yeah.
And you're right. And how evocative was that? Oh, it sent chills. It was a great choice.
Good.
And we've got more. We've got more in kind of a similar vein, actually, which is an interesting insight to, I'm trying to get into your head, Grahame, into your mind and how you work. And I think you can't be a painter. I know you said you don't like the passion word, but you cannot do what you do and not be fired by passion, surely.
It's just such a cliched word. Of course, I love it hugely. I love it because I can't stop wanting to make more things. You said earlier about the word talent, and that's another one that I'm very wary of. I've never regarded myself as being talented, but what I do know is that I loved the idea of being a painter and the magic of painting and drawing. Creating something that's never been in the world before from a blank sheet or a blank surface. And that magical creation of something where there was nothing before is what I always found, from as young as I can remember, I always found that incredibly appealing. And I think I was born not with a talent, but with a love of that idea. And that's what propels you through the learning and through the hard times when you have to learn things that are not easy, and when others drop away. If you love it enough, you don't stop learning. You keep going when, like when I was 10 and so on, and all kids draw and all kids paint. But only some keep going because they love it more than the others. And because you keep going, you get better.
I think I picked up on the passion thing because New Zealanders are often described as passionless people, and I think it is quite true in some way, probably because of our Presbyterian roots, and we feel that we shouldn't express ourselves too freely, or love too freely, or live too freely, or dance in the street because we don't want to draw attention to ourselves, and so I think I love the fact that, for example, there are lots of Brazilians who live in Queenstown and this area now, because I think they bring that passion, and I think it's lacking, and I still think it's lacking. So it's great when you talk to people who care so much that it's what drives them every day, like yourself, Yeah,
we have been an incredibly conformist society, and I think, the old cliche of the tall poppy syndrome still applies to a degree, perhaps not as much as when I was younger. Thank God for that. But we don't really celebrate, as, for example, the Americans do, people who go out on a limb and say, damn it, look at me, and I don't care what you think. We are so dictated by what others think.
Aren't we? And it's awful, and it's still there. I guess it'll always be still there in some way.
Yeah, I think that's us. In some ways, it makes us appealing to other cultures. You read frequently of the fact that people admire New Zealanders' modesty and quiet sort of efficiency, and a lot of us loathe the American look at me phenomenon, in which they are the stars of their own show constantly.
Yeah.
But who knows? That's just part of our makeup, and we have to work within it.
I think so. We're talking with Grahame Sydney. If you've just tuned in to Southbeat, you're listening to The Platform, and we're having a wonderful chat with the artist Grahame Sydney. Right, you're back with Southbeat and Grahame Sydney, who is on the line from his home in the Cambrian Valley. Grahame, really great to talk with you. It was interesting that you never like to be referred to as Sir, even though you've been awarded that several years ago now.
Oh, last year, Leanne.
Oh, yep. Sorry. I thought you'd been Sir forever.
I'm not that old.
Oh, gosh. Well, you should have been Sir forever, but you said you've kind of been there, done that, and now you're thinking, hey, I don't really need to have that in front of my name when people address me. Oh,
no, of course not. It never occurs to me. And in fact, I forget about it 99% of the time, and very happy that way.
Well, that's very humble, which is kind of relates back to our last conversation. But maybe that's not where you're coming from with this. It's just something that, you got your ONZM, and then, no, I'm sorry, you were knighted. That's why I'm confused, because you got the initial award and then the knighting came in 2021.
That's right.
Yes,
yeah.
I knew it, so I'm not completely off track. And that was, of course, for your services to the arts. And as you said, you've worked for, over 4 decades. And I want to ask you, are you still completely delighted and inspired by the landscape around you? Does it move you to paint every day?
Yes, I love the landscape around me. I love waking up to the view that we have from this house. I look out where I'm sitting now. Mount St. Bathans is emerging from the cloud, and it's dusted in snow now for the first time, as I said earlier. The Hawkdens are the main horizon that I have, but they are behind cloud right now. I built here so that I could see these things, and I do find there's something very special and meaningful to me about being in Central Otago. It's quite embarrassing, actually, to admit that I'm going to be 74 on Monday, a figure I find literally unbelievable.
Yeah.
But of my 74 years, I've spent 71 of them living south of the Waitaki. So I'm very much anchored in the south and in central, and I belong here, and that's what my work is about, that exploring that strange sense of belonging somewhere and trying to give that connection and that deep anchoring some sort of visual form, so that that story of my belonging can last well beyond my own life. But the Central Otago landscape in 2022 is very, very different to what it was when I first started my professional life in 1974.
And you've been very outspoken this year about the wilding pine problem, and you've called them a cancerous growth on the landscape. So you're a big campaigner for that. What upsets you the most about the way this is happening and being dealt with or not being dealt with?
Well, what I worry about most, Leanne, is that not only that the wilding pines are an exotic, they're nothing to do with our native biosphere at all. They're an unwanted visitor. They're a new form of colonization. Any form of conifer like this is an exotic, and it belongs to other countries, not to us. I am perfectly comfortable and happy with any form of vegetation which is native to New Zealand. But the wilding pine happily lives in our landscape and thrives in it and obliterates everything natural. And what's happening, in fact, it's happening in front of me where I sit now, because on the other side of the Cambrian Valley, where in 2004 there was one or two lone exotic pine trees on a grassy golden terrace, there is now a dense plantation, a dense forest. It's taken 15 years for those parent trees to spawn and spread, as I said, cancerously, and they are now completely obliterating everything which is natural and native to Central Otago. In other words, it's part of the ongoing and I think unwelcome greening of a very golden, distinctive landscape which was Central Otago. Yeah. New Zealand is amazing in its smallness. We have a continent's variety of landscapes from north to south, and Central Otago was the spectacular and very unique example of a semi-arid landscape. Primarily tussock grasses, beech forests way up in the higher altitudes, but tussocks and Spaniards and matagari and that sort of thing. When the first humans saw and the landscape now is trying its best, I think. Well, I shouldn't say the landscape is trying, but we occupants are changing the landscape into something which is far less distinctive and far more like everywhere else.
Absolutely.
In its greening.
Yes.
It's happening through irrigation, and it's happening through intensification, which everybody is determined on growth and getting more and more from the land. And on top of that is the spread of wildings, which is an evergreen, nothing to do with our extraordinary seasons, our wonderful distinctive seasons.
Right.
The evergreens are the same no matter what the damn season. And the greening of Central Otago was an immense disappointment to me.
Yeah, and it's great that you're campaigning on this, and I want to talk about it again shortly, but why don't we take another song? You've chosen Bonnie Raitt, and we've got Matters of the Heart lined up. Personal meaning to this for you?
Yeah, all of these songs ring bells for me, Leanne. That's what you look to the musicians to do, to find ways to say things on your behalf. And it's just like the first one by Randy Newman. That sounded like it could have been my story. That's one too.
All right, well, let's hear Matters of the Heart, Bonnie Raitt.
You don't know that one?
No, I hadn't heard that, and I'm just looking at the opening line. Broken heart, bloodshot stare, signs of a fool who cared too much. It's a great tune. Well,
she's a wonderful singer and performer, that woman. Slide guitarist to beat them all.
Yeah.
But she's about the same age as me, and I first came across Bonnie Raitt in the early 1970s, and I've loved her all the time. Imagine being able to sing like that.
Oh, she's right up there as one of my favourite singers too. I think a lot of people only cottoned on to her when she had that huge hit, Something to Talk About, but obviously there's so much more, and she's been around a long time. She's just...
Oh, yeah. Do you know the wonderful album and the DVD called Road Tested?
I've heard of it. I'm not that familiar, I have to be honest.
You should get it, Leanne. It's just a fantastic concert.
Yeah, well, I think she's magic, and there is a singer who's currently living back here. She's normally based in Nashville, Jackie Bristow, and she actually opened for Bonnie Raitt, and I was super impressed to hear that. And she's another one who just worships her. And Jackie is also a very talented singer. If you get a chance to see her, she's a little bit similar in style to Bonnie, perhaps.
I flew to Auckland to see Bonnie Raitt in concert, and. Bonnie apparently has relatives in Auckland and comes to New Zealand occasionally.
Oh, wow.
But I went up to the concert in Auckland and went with my old mate Roger Hall. And here we were, two old buggers in the audience right up near the front row. And at one stage, Roger leant over to me and said, "We should let's throw our long johns at her."
A bit like the Tom Jones thing, throwing in your G-string, except they were long johns.
Exactly.
You're talking about the playwright, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, man. And that's great. I bet you laughed your socks off, or your long johns off.
I could have watched Bonnie Raitt for weeks on end. I still do.
Oh, look, I'm loving your choices. Maybe we need to give you your own music hour on the show as well. We're getting some nice feedback too.
I need more than an hour, though. That's the trouble.
Oh, look, the list Grahame sent was incredibly long, and I've got loads more to play, but we're already getting short on time. Actually, do you think we should go to Joni Mitchell? Because maybe we do just focus a bit on the music. We've got A Case of You, and I love any Joni. So would you like to introduce this one for us, Grahame, please?
Well, I think this is possibly one of her most famous, isn't it? I just think, is there anyone who writes more beautifully than Joni Mitchell, for our age group anyway? That album she did called Blue, I think, reached into millions and millions of hearts, and she's another one who never appeared to please anybody but herself, and carved a fabulous career. She's still going, of course, and being lauded as she ages. But she's recognised, I think, as being one of the major influences from the 60s and 70s in particular, and then she evolved through into all forms of jazz and everything else. She's been right through the whole gamut, following her own instincts the whole time, and saying, if you don't like it, I don't care.
Yeah.
But A Case of You is an unbelievably beautiful song to me.
Yeah.
What a metaphor.
Yeah, well, that's A Case of You, isn't it just? So let's hear that now. Joni Mitchell of You, the choice of Grahame Sydney, who's on the line now. Thank you so much for these exquisite songs.
Well, I listen to music a lot, Leanne, because, in the studio all day, I'm sitting painting away, and I've got to keep things... I've got to keep being entertained, to keep sitting there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get up and go and make another cup of tea, and you do that 10, 12 times a day. So I've always been an avid listener and a happy listener, and I've got a pretty big library. These days, I listen a lot to things on YouTube. I don't have to watch them, but YouTube is a remarkable treasure chest of podcasts and documentaries and so on.
Right.
And it's all a matter of things to keep me seated, really.
Do you know, it's interesting, just looking at the lyrics to that song, were you also drawn to the song because there is this verse that says, "Oh, I am a lonely painter. I live in a box of paints. I'm frightened by the devil." I don't think that's you. And I'm drawn to those ones that ain't afraid. Wow. I mean, that's got to relate. Painter. Well, yeah, of course.
She's a very good painter, and that was an alternative career for her. But, well, of course, it rings true. But she's mainly, for me, a musician. You don't take the lyrics too seriously or too personally at times like that. I mean, probably the greatest song about a painter, I suppose, from the same era was Don McLean's Vincent, and that certainly raised an enormous amount of interest in Van Gogh and in Don McLean, as it should have.
It's one of my favourite songs, but it does make me very, very sad. I find it hard to listen to it and not to cry, like really cry.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, I just find it heartbreaking. I mean, I love sad songs. I'm drawn to them. But I just when he gets to that last line about this world was too beautiful or something like that for one as you, that just cuts me. Music moves me a lot, and I think it does most people. It's been really good hearing your choices. I cannot believe we're almost coming up to news. We haven't really talked a lot about a lot of things that I wanted to discuss, but I wanted to ask you, where do you go to kick up your heels around the traps? Do you whip down to St. Bathans often?
I think I'm the world's most boring man, Leanne. I'll be a terrible disappointment to you because I'm not one to ever kick up my heels. I think I wish I was. I'd love to be more
Okay.
And that it got me into trouble and got me into being a person that I didn't want to be. So I stopped drinking, although we do have a house full of booze because we have so many lovely friends in the wine industry, and I think it's a great industry. And I certainly don't want to stop other people enjoying it. But, no, I don't kick up my heels. I'd love to, for example, I've always been acutely embarrassed by any thought of having to perform or act, not perform, but to act or to dance. That just absolutely mortifies me because But
you lay your soul bare on canvas. No sweat.
Strange, isn't it?
It is. Grahame, we have to go now. I've gone actually over time, which is not surprising. We've got the news waiting.
Sorry.
But it's kind of probably my poor management. But hey, it's been a pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Enjoyed it very much, Leanne.
I hope we can do it again with some more song choices.
Love to.
Love to. All right. Well, have a wonderful weekend, Grahame.